welcome back to On the Soul's Terms podcast. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Ryan Nielsen, who just reached out maybe just a few days ago. And Ryan, it's so great to meet you and to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Chris. It's so great to meet you as well. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, maybe I just encourage you to introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about what seems like, having only just become accustomed to your website and your work, it seems like a really fascinating journey that you're on, the musicality, the soul, the depth, all of the different sort of threads that are woven through your life. But maybe you can tell us a little bit about the I am.
Sure. So I professionally, I'm a musician, jazz musician, trumpeter, and a professor at a university here in the States. I grew up in a very I would say like a very literal religious tradition.
Okay.
And about 4 years, well, really in the pandemic, when I saw the effects that were kind of landing on my own children and on my students, I started to get really curious about the nature of trauma, just to see what I could learn to try and show up for them, and for myself and so the journey in a nutshell was about it kind of started with kind of more, I guess, popular figures, Bessel van der Kolk and Gabor Mate, and I loved their works, and those eventually took me into Peter Levine and somatic work and things, and then I started learning about attachment things, and then I found Donald Kalsched's work. Anyways, and I realized that I thought, wouldn't it be beautiful if someone could bring these modalities together? And that's when I found Marian Dunlay's work, and I started. We're doing the certification with her in body dreaming. But maybe especially relevant for today's conversation. There was a day when my wife and I were on a date and had decided to go to an independent bookstore. And she chose one for us to go to that we'd never been to. It was a very small one. And that's where I found Marian Woodman's work. And I found the book, Leaving My Father's House, which for me, with my religious background, the whole book is about healing from and through the wounds of patriarchy and of hierarchical power over structures that are based in the pursuit of perfection, I think is how she defines that culture. And those were wounds that I felt very familiar with. And so discovering that book at that time was really important for me, and really kind of launched a huge part of the journey for me over the last few years that eventually landed me in astrology land. So that's kind of a summary, I guess.
Wow. Yeah. And just, I mean, there's so much there that we could pick up and pick out and work with. But I like that we're in a nutshell, which is part of our fairy tale today. So I do want to go into that. But as you said, you found your way into astrology, and then tell me a little bit about your journey with astrology so far, before we jump into fairy tale city.
I mean, I've just been immersing myself in everything that I can. I think I'm 3 years into reading so much and but the people who I really feel drawn to are, like, I love the work of Liz Green. I love James Hillman's writings. And so I loved stumbling into the work of Brian Clark, who feels rooted in that soulful approach to me. it really has been like a self-study kind of thing for me, to come into a sense of my own relationship to this world. But there's something about the beauty of recognizing that there's this whole cast of characters both within us and without, and that we can relate to them creatively. To me, the symbolic engagement feels really playful. And I'll just say, as a musician, I don't use that word flippantly or tritely. When we play, it's both very, very curious and playful, and like deadly serious. If I'm playing with the musicians who I love to play with, it's like it's all in. It's a complete surrender to the quality of the moment of time. And so there was this resonance between the idea of cycles and time for me as a musician, because I perform a lot of jazz, which is very, I feel like it comes straight out of the archetypal feminine. Now I have words for that, because the grooves, the dances that are there are both cyclical and ever changing. And there's this experience. If a musician tries to perform the same piece the same way 2 nights in a row, it will die. So musicians, for me, I feel very familiar with the idea of the moment in time having a particular quality that you must partner with and surrender to, but in an active way. You can't simply react to it. You can't simply if you want the music to come alive, you have to offer something of you to that quality. And then there's this beautiful, right? Something breathes in through the experience. And so that idea of finding a language to mythically and symbolically talk about that quality of a moment in time just pulled me in. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
We could hang out on that for a long time.
Yeah. And but thank you, because I think you just gave some really beautiful articulation to, I guess, what I see or what I sense astrology to be, which is always a it's you can't pin it down, and that's kind of its flavor, right? But what you just said then, that you can't play the same song twice, and it's the same. I think anytime I look at a birth chart, even my own birth chart, I've recognized over the years that I can't look at this. It's not going to be the same next time I look at it. Something else is going to draw me in, because it is an alive document. It's an alive. It's the sky. It's the sky as a reflection of the earth. So it's Uranus as the reflection of Gaia. It's Urania's mirror. It's mirroring me back to me, and I am in the mirror, changing, and it's changing with me to show me who I am now. And so it's a really beautiful sort of, and that soul, the lunar approach to astrology, we might call it, as far as like, that's the same moon, reflecting the same sun, but no night is ever going to be the same. And so I love that, and the presence of what's in each moment, as Dane Ruggiero once said, it's a snapshot of existence. It's just a snapshot of the existence of that moment, but it has to happen in that moment. And then when you're in another moment, you're watching that moment for where you are now. So it's really beautiful to feel that in your musicality. And we talked before about music and healing being, essentially to me the same thing, all about frequencies. And yeah, super powerful. So, part of you reaching out was to say, hey, there's you've been listening to the podcast and really tuning in, and especially enjoying the Brian Clark and Melanie Reinhardt episodes and the House series and things. So when you reached out, you mentioned Marian Woodman's work, I believe, on this particular fairy tale, which you were like, oh, it's so sixth house, but also can draw us through the first six houses and take us up to that threshold. And I really loved the way you presented that. And so I thought, well, let's do it. Let's just jump on a call and get on the pod. And so even our connection here is very emergent and very lively and alive. So why don't you perhaps introduce the fairy tale that sprung to mind for the sixth and the first six houses in a way?
Okay. So the fairy tale, and this is the fairy tale that was part of that book that I mentioned that Marian Woodman wrote called Leaving My Father's House, which is also a collaboration with three other women. And so there's something collaborative in her relating to the tale as well. Should I just dive into the tale? Are we?
Yeah, well, let's maybe just give us a sense of why this tale and some of its elements, and then we can just like jump in from there. Right. Yeah, give us a little context.
Well, the way that Marian Woodman approaches it really is a journey of like a wounded. It's a very Jungian approach, but it's a journey of a kind of a wounded inner feminine who is trying to find the courage to leave her father's kingdom and basically to come into her own and to root herself in her own authenticity. And what drew me into the parallels between this tale and astrology is that Marian Woodman in the introduction, actually, because in the tale, the main character, she goes through this process of donning three dresses, one each dress, and the first dress is the golden dress, the second is the silver dress, and the third is the dress of the stars. And so Marian Woodman immediately brings in language of solar consciousness and lunar consciousness, and that each of these represents a particular part of the healing cycles that somebody experiences. She points out that we're all children of the patriarchy. And I know that word can be problematic and catalyzing today in some ways. So maybe if it might be worth spending some time with how she defines that. It's so beautiful because
tell me how she defines that, because I think that's really important to sort of like see what the flavor of the word is that we're using.
So one synonym that she uses repeatedly is the pseudo-masculine. And she writes very she writes so movingly about how all of us have not only both the inner feminine and the inner masculine, but also that there's this really beautiful space in myth for the androgyne, for like androgynous characters in myth and hermaphroditic characters in myth are really precious symbols of the coming together of inner sun and inner moon. And so it's a very layered approach. She does give a definition of patriarchy as any culture that's devoted to power in the pursuit of perfection. And I actually have hanging on my wall a quote by her where she says, perfection massacres the feminine. To move toward perfection is to move out of life or never to enter.
Wow.
And for me, just with my background, where perfection was literally the stated goal within my community and my culture growing up, the idea of becoming perfect like God was literalized. It was what we were supposed to do.
Wow. Yeah.
To find someone who could speak so urgently and with such depth about what that does to this part of us that we're calling the feminine. She also does a beautiful job of making it clear that we're not talking about gender here. That when we use the terms masculine and feminine, it's like yin and yang, or yang and yin, and Shiva and Shakti. It's just that in Greco-Roman mythology, the symbols for those two energies, and also in our dreams, a Jungian might say, are represented often by, not always by, but often by masculine and feminine figures. And that it's just a language of symbol that evolved in the psyche. And so somehow those many layers of depth around those terms kind of helped me like exhale and settle into experiencing a different kind of dimensionality inside myself. And this particular tale being about finding the courage to leave the Father's kingdom, to move into to trusting nature, because she finds solace in the hollow of a tree. She risks trusting nature, and there's something healing in that. And then the way that she has to learn how to do the work in the kitchen of caring for the hearth, of sweeping and sorting the ashes, of transforming food into bread soup. So there's this idea of taking the raw materials of the psyche and through alchemical heat, transforming it into something that can nourish. And then this beautiful image of the tale where she'll take these trinkets, where she's hiding them in the soup and gifting them to the king in the castle, where she kind of flees to, and where she's being mentored into her selfhood by a cook, very sixth house. That these are messages she's sending to herself as she's preparing herself to kind of step into her own shoes, is the way that Marian Woodman reads it. So that the encounter with the king at the end, of course, isn't about encountering the king. It's about her experiencing her own innate wholeness. There's just so much there. And it felt like such a beautiful container for what I had lived over the 20 years previous, as I was trying to sort out how to leave my religious community without literalizing that community and those parts of myself, so that I could hold a space for the people I love, but also honor what I needed to do in order to find my own sense of healing and wholeness. It was just the perfect tale to offer a kind of witness and a way forward, backwards, behind, and through, as I continued to trust more. Yeah, what Liz Green calls circuitous meanderings of the soul, to trust those rhythms. So I think I feel like maybe I'm circuitously meandering in my talking right now, but it's such a beautiful tale. It was so important for me to find at the time that I found it.
Yeah, I can really feel that. And I can feel I think it's really important to do what you just did, to spend a little time with the definitions of the words, so that we can really feel and drop into like what we're talking about. Because sometimes words get so picked up and regurgitated by the culture that they sort of somehow get so pushed through the machine, and that they lose their meanings in a lot of ways, and then get polarized back out to us as, well, is it this or that, and it becomes this really strange, it's such a strange phenomenon, that's only been amplified by the dawn of these new technologies of this shallow kind of attention grabbing shallowness that we're all in, and so that if we don't, what was it? Circuitously meander, and spend a little time, then we end up just kind of like heading off on the wrong foot. And so I'm glad that we've spent some time with that, because I think that's pretty easy to relate to for anyone, that the idea of being in the kind of culture that I hadn't really thought about this kind of like the striving for perfection, or what did you say about it? It was like what was her definition again?
That it's a culture that's devoted to power and
Devoted to
power
over.
Yeah, in the name of perfection,
In
or
the name of
pursuit.
perfection. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's that in the name of perfection, which is really different. I actually wrote this on a post recently about to perfect, as in the verb, is very sixth house. Actually, it's like going through again and again and again, and making sure you're kind of like going round. And there's a circular rhythm to the verb to perfect, which is different than the kind of abstract noun perfection, which, as Michael Mead elaborates on, means the word actually means through the form, and so therefore means dead. As in it's through. The form is through, the form is complete, and therefore is dead now. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it actually it means a culture in service of power and death, in the non-soulful version of death, killing things essentially, and then selling them off. So I think it's really, through the form, already dead once it gets there. Whereas the actual process of perfecting, I think, is such a beautiful thing. It's kind of like what you were talking about, like it's deadly serious to play with great musicians, because there's something going on there where you're wanting to do better than you've ever done, but in the moment and very much alive. And there's a perfecting to that is a process that I really strongly value, actually. And then perfection is when it's already dead. And so in service to perfection is in service to the death, or the coldness or the aloofness or the emptiness of form. But the perfecting is an alive process of like, this could be like a little better. Let's just put a little bit of this in there, but it's alive. Like it never ends, that process, like the process of perfecting never ends, whereas the process towards perfection is a dead end.
Well, and I instantly hear in both of those a contrast between a linear concept of life and a cyclical concept of life.
Yeah, indeed.
And that is what I feel. That is what has felt so healing to me. Within the language of myth and astrology is a language that is replete with the cyclical.
Yeah.
And there's something about this linear notion towards perfection where there's an end goal.
Yeah.
That is really, for me as a musician and as a person, it's very damaging. Like it did not help me, and it did not help me. And it was exhausting to live in that place of just pushing for better, more, striving, doing. That's very different than a practice of dropping into this moment.
Yeah.
And partnering with it.
Yeah. I kind of think of like one of the stories of the sixth house that I was going to was Groundhog Day, which is one of those rare moments that that film really nails something or gives you kind of a spiritual concept wrapped up in a kind of a silly film in a way. But essentially he goes back again and again in that cyclical nature of that same day. And that's how I find the sixth sometimes. It's like, this day's going to happen again. The sun's going to rise again. I'm going to go through this season again, and I'm going to get more and more chances. And that to me brings the emotion to my soul of like, oh, wow, I get another chance and another chance and another chance. And in a sense, where Bill Murray's character in Groundhog Day, where it shifts, is he actually does not strive towards perfection, but he does start to perfect his day. He does start to go like, actually, I could make this the most beautiful day, and I could learn things, and he learns the piano, and he starts to kind of like put things into his day, like habits that allow him to become to become more soul and more in tune and more in touch. And he becomes in touch with the people around him, and he wants to help this guy and, like help that guy that's going to die that day and see if he can really help him out or not. And this destructive force suddenly turns towards a creative and life affirming force, which is how eventually he does end up sort of breaking the thing just by living it really well one time.
Yeah.
And then it sort of breaks the loop,
Well, as a pretty diehard Bill Murray fan, I love that. And
yeah. So I think maybe, you talk about perfection, and that's definitely the start of our tale. So yeah, the tale that we're going to explore today is from the Grimm Brothers collection, and it's called Allerlirauh. It's a little bit of a tongue twister. Allerlirauh. Have I said that right? Do you believe?
I have no idea.
Great. Perfect. Thank you.
I was literally going to ask you the same thing.
Yeah.
Is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's Allerlirauh, and the name actually means fur skin. It means animal skin or fur skin. So that's the context. We've got a fur skin kind of a name, or a pelt in a way. And this is the story, and it actually begins quite along these lines, doesn't it? Because there's something at the beginning that is about perfection. There's something about death and perfection right at the beginning here. So maybe you can walk us into the first scene, and we can have a feel of that.
So, I love the phrase "once upon a time," so I'm going to invoke Kairos time. Once upon a time, there was a golden-haired daughter of a golden-haired queen and king, and the queen was known to be the most beautiful woman in all the land, and she became very sick and was on her deathbed. And she exacted from her husband a promise that he would never marry someone unless they had hair just as golden as hers, and that they were at least as beautiful as she was. And then she passes away. So there's those themes of perfection right from the get-go of. And that Allerlirauh, as the daughter, has inherited this golden hair that kind of symbolizes this desire for a perfect kind of image to me. So yeah, right at the get-go, we're right in the middle of those themes.
Yeah, so the king is immediately on the lookout and searching, and searches high and wide and looks around for this image of perfection that he can't find anywhere in the kingdom until his gaze falls upon his daughter, and he realizes he's being pressured by all of his advisors that there needs to be a queen in the kingdom, that things are out of balance. And he realizes that she has hair as golden as her mother's. And so he tells her that she's going to marry him the next day. And so Allerlirauh, is that how you said it? Allerlirauh, yeah.
She has an idea, and she says to her father that she will only be willing to marry him if he can produce for her a dress as golden as the sun, a dress as silver as the moon, and a dress as bright as the stars. And she also says that she will need from him a fur mantle made of the skins of every animal that lives in his kingdom. So 1,000 furs. And she then assumes that that would be impossible for anyone to do. And so she goes on living her life assuming that she'll never need to confront that problem again. So Marian Woodman points out that she kind of explores the idea of that mantle of furs representing the dead instincts of the father's kingdom. So that there's something about going out and killing the living animals and removing their skins and giving it to Allerlirauh. which he does. He, much to her surprise and horror, he finds people in the kingdom who can make the 3 dresses, and his hunters successfully find every single animal in the kingdom, and he makes her this coat of fur and tells her they're getting married the next day upon gifting them to her. And in that moment, Allerlirauh knows she has to leave. And so something in her shifts, and she decides that she's going to escape that night. And so she finds a nut. And inside of this nut, she packs the 3 dresses. And she also packs 3 golden trinkets, really small trinkets. One is the spinning wheel, one is a ring, and the other one is a reel. And she packs them into the nut, and she covers herself head to toe in soot, and then places on top of her the mantle of 1,000 furs, and following her instincts, leaves the castle, leaves the kingdom. And once she has finally left the boundary of her father's kingdom, she finds herself in a forest, and she feels drawn to a tree, and she hides in the hollow of a tree and just falls asleep. Maybe that's a good place to pause.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place to pause. Yeah. I mean, so much has happened already in this story, and this is why I love these fairy tales. I love the Grimm collection. And this is what fairy tales can do. They can evoke so much within just a few pages, within just a few lines, and have so many images running all at once. But I guess I'm drawn to, she tries to outwit, it's like, it's a terrifying moment, right? It's like, this is the turning of the king. It's very explicit within the story that this king has turned, and everyone's like, oh no, what's happened here? You know, like he's turned his gaze in the wrong direction. But ultimately, as you pointed out at the beginning, it's like, well, he's been set the task of perfection. You know, he's been sent the task of perfection by his dying wife. And she said, like, no, only this, which is kind of this impossible task. And I think from memory, there's like a grieving process. He doesn't want to engage in any of that. Then he starts looking, then under the pressure, as you said, of the kingdom, he starts looking for that bride. The kingdom needs a queen. So we have this sort of like, already with the death of the queen, we have already a slant in the direction of the masculine, or a slant in the direction of the patriarchy has already occurred at the loss of the queen, right? That's what sort of has already occurred at the beginning. But then he's cursed as well, this particular king, where as he looks around, he eventually lands his gaze in really the exact wrong place, in this tragic moment where the power has turned sour and bitter, and this awful situation that she finds herself in, this princess.
Yeah. It's a horrific situation.
Yeah.
And that idea of that vacuum that gets created by the absence of the feminine, even though the feminine figure, and again, thinking of all of these characters as belonging really to the psyche of Allerlirauh, right? It's like something about this complete absence of the mother in her death, of that presence of the inner feminine. I think why I resonate with that so much, again, is that within my upbringing, we had a father god, and we also spoke of a mother god, but quite literally we're not allowed to speak to her. That was an offense punishable by excommunication.
Really?
Which did happen to people. And I think that's just a really vivid image of this. There's this father figure, this intact, who is identified with power, and the complete absence of that sacred feminine. And there was something in that just really resonated with me. And so I feel like this for those of us who grew up in ways where we adapted to the expectations outside of us at the expense of our authenticity, as any child would. There's something beautiful about this moment where Allerlirauh, I think it's her first taste of her own first house, if we're gonna
Yeah.
that sometimes the beginning of touching into that first house of I am, right? That's another Liz Green line that I love, is she calls the first house the vernal cry, I'm here. And sometimes the beginning of being connected to that energy is knowing what you're not. And when the power system in her inner psyche and in her community looks at her that way, and she goes, I'm not that. That's the beginning of this, of a new birth, I think. So I feel really drawn to that moment. There's something in her courage there.
And then she tries to sort of outwit the situation in a sense by giving some impossible tasks.
Yeah. It reminds me of Clarissa Pinkola Estes talking about the terrible bargain, right? She with is that the Handless Maiden, I think?
Yeah.
When you strike that bargain to keep your material security at the expense of your soul. She calls it the terrible bargain. And it's like, here's that theme again. Allerlirauh is trying to strike a bargain. She lives in a castle. She's a princess. Things are fine materially, even if they're really, really, really backwards in every other way.
Yeah.
And so she tries so hard to find a way to stay. I didn't intend to talk about my personal story this much, but maybe it's helpful as to ground.
Yeah.
But this, for me, the first 12 years of my career as a professor, I was employed by a university that was owned by the church I grew up in.
Wow.
And so even though something had shifted inside me, and I knew I had to find a new way to find my own healing, I really wanted to find a way to strike that bargain. I really wanted it because my livelihood depended on striking the bargain. And I was married and had kids, and so I really can empathize with her wanting to find another way. But can it be a yes and? Can't I find a way to stay here, and I'll make the best of this situation, and I'll do what I can, but she can't. There's a breaking point where she just has to go. She's going to have to leave a sort of artificial shallow rooting in the fourth house to step out into the world, cross that threshold into the fifth, I think.
Yeah, and I am drawn back into the Handless Maiden moments, because that's also, there's some deep mirroring and resonances in that story, another Grimm Brothers story. But that sense of, she really tries to do that, and she even says to her father, I'm yours, I'm basically yours, to do with me what you will, right to the point where she puts her hands out, and after it's all done and the devil can't take her in the end, they offer her, after all of that trauma, they say, hey, listen, that was a big sacrifice, but we're going to offer you everything, and we know you don't have hands, but you can have everything here, and you won't want for anything in your life. And she says, much like Allerlirauh says, all I know is I can't stay here. It's a really powerful moment in the journey where it's like, that's all I know, is that I'm not staying here. I've been too injured by this. And that's the same for Allerlirauh, because she's decided, like, well, that didn't work. My bargain striking didn't work, because he was so persistent in his pursuit of this perfection that he was willing to do all of those things. But at the very least with her, she now has the boon, of her shitty situation. And it's a crazy thing that, like, in a nutshell, is this where we get the idea, in a nutshell? Because, like, somehow in this nutshell, she fits 3 dresses, some trinkets, like with this magical nutshell. And then she does something super interesting, right? I mean, she's asked for the basically, yeah, the furs of 1,000 animals. So essentially, she's got a multi-animal pelt,
Mhm.
and she covers herself in soot. So she goes into the ashes in herself. She sort of acknowledges in herself that this is now a grieving time. I mean, a deep loss, and then puts the mantle of these animals on, and then basically rejoins the forest, right? She becomes
Yeah.
multi-animaled and rejoins the forest. It's like, okay, she lets go of anything royal, and that maybe is the covering in soot as well, to put herself back in the ashes, let go of anything royal, like Cinderella, who's also lost her mother, and she's lost her goldenness, and now it's back to the soot. But she goes another step with this animal pelt, multiple animal pelt, and then finding a little hole in a tree. I mean, this is such a vivid place that she finds, and then rests and goes to sleep. So she basically goes deep into it's like the feminine, right? And this is the thing. I think we should mention that these stories, I mention it a lot on the podcast, but they're gathered from the peasant class, basically, of Germany, which gives you the sense that, usually old wives' tales, so these are the crones that usually come forth to tell the stories. It gives you the sense that these stories were held throughout the thousands of years of power, imbalance. These stories just kept getting told around bonfires or hearths. They just had to be told, and usually by the oppressed, who are like, okay, well, the next generation and the next generation are going to have to remember what's happened, and we'll remind them through stories that they won't be able to forget because they're going to be so vivid. It's not going to take some kind of like academic intelligence to know these stories. They're just going to love them and then want to tell them. And even if they don't know what they're telling, that through thousands of years, these stories will survive, and this one has survived. And so then you get the sense of like something they talk about within fairy tales is like, okay, so then the feminine becomes in a regressed form, in a sense, right? It becomes, it's no longer honored in the kingdom. That's very clear. And so then it goes down in a way, which is not a negative place to go, but it regroups within the animal, within the instincts within the animal, and at the bottom of a tree in a cave and rooting down and everything. It's kind of like, as we, very fourth house, right? It's the root system, the I see, the I can't see, it can't be seen, she can't be seen. She certainly can't be seen as the princess. And she roots down in a cave, in a tree, with the roots and the animal skins and the soot, like it's a beautiful image, and the unconsciousness, she's gone to sleep. And all of that comes together in this, like, this is where I'm going to be, kind of an intelligent response to the situation. No?
I love that. I love that. Yes. Well, and there's something too about the fur skin, the mantle of furs. I think in your conversation with Brian, he mentioned the threshold of the first house to the second house involving like soulful connection to objects. And when I think about the idea of children choosing objects to keep with them so that they feel like they can go out into the world, I sort of sense this with like she's holding on to these dead instincts of her father's kingdom, and she's not ready to let go of it yet. Something in her knows she actually needs to. That's sort of like a portable, artificial fourth house
Yeah.
that she keeps returning to through the tale. But she's also encountering the rooted tree, and the hollow of a mother tree is, and I think you mentioned the word regression, and I think that's another word that would be fun to tease out together, because I think that can be sort of pejorative, especially from a linear context, but it's really this instinct that she has that she needs to move into the womb again for a time. She's going to have to root into a richer kind of soil
Mm.
in a more instinctive process if she's going to come into her wholeness,
Yeah. And I've done a few podcasts talking about progress, regress.
Yeah, teach me about that.
Well, I mean, I find like the best analogy that I've got for it is Ariadne's thread in the labyrinth, right? So what happens with that thread? You have the thread with you. It's attached to the entrance, and Theseus is able to make his way through the labyrinth only because of this thread. It's given to him by Ariadne. It was given to Ariadne by Daedalus, who's the architect of the labyrinth in the first place. And I always see it as a red thread. Some people see it as a golden thread, whatever it is. But let's say you have this thread and you've taken like 6 wrong turns, right? And you find yourself at a dead end. The only intelligent way to go at that point that you've been progressing is to regress. So it's time to trace that back, right? It's time to go back. Where did I go wrong here? And that may take you back until the last turn, or it may take you back until a few turns ago, or it may take you way further back than that. And sometimes, it's like in fairy tales, you often get the idea that there's a sunken treasure, and someone has to go to the bottom of the ocean, and there's a chest at the bottom of the ocean that's holding this dress or this thing that you've got to find. In order to, and the bottom of the ocean is also a regressed place in that something was lost back there. Now, in the idea of the labyrinth, you might have made a few wrong turns, but the idea of humanity and our apparent progress, we might have made 1,000 wrong turns, right? We might have made so many wrong turns that we don't even remember when there was a wrong turn anymore. In which case, we'd have to be going back, and essentially re-enter through the unconscious. We'd have to go to the lowest place possible, because at least there would be the origin, there would be it in its root form. And I think that's exactly where she goes. She goes to the root form of the feminine. She goes right down into the instinctual place. And I think it's really significant that she goes unconscious. She goes to sleep. So she's going to have to go all the way back there. And of course, in a, as you said, the way that we're using it, the patriarchal culture, it's a progress-oriented culture. So everything is about progress. So it's just the drive to go forward, right? In which case you get more and more demons in the background of that culture because there's more and more material that is still asking to come back. So oftentimes, like you'll see a monstrous form come up in a story, and that could be a regressed element of that particular thing, or let's take the first Grimm Brothers collection story, The Frog King. Well, the masculine in that has become a frog. So the masculine has gone back to frog form, right? That's a regressed form. And it will have to be dealt with in order to bring it back into some kind of relationship again, which it does by getting thrown against the wall. The frog, not kissed, because that wouldn't possibly work. One would need to use some force to bring it back, not sort of just like, anyway. Or in another story, The Three Feathers, it's the toad, and the toad is the feminine and the frog is the masculine typically. And the feminine's lost in that kingdom. And so so we have to go down underneath the floor. The feather that the third brother throws is in the air, falls down. There's a trap door, goes down, sees this toad woman with 6 little toads cycling around. Then he has to choose one for his princess. The feminine is underground in toad form, and the masculine is in frog form by the well. That's a regressed form. It's in no way, sure, there's negative connotations even in that, but I think the real soul lesson is like, I am going to have to return to something of the essential, as in go back to the essence, or the original, as in go back to the origin, if I'm going to recover this. Because it just doesn't have a context anymore. So that's what I would say about regression.
I love that. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I love so much about this tale is it's like a rhythm. It's deep wisdom about the rhythms of regression. Like when to move back, when do you go back? Because it happens over and over again. Well, in the next portion of the tale, the king's huntsmen come and they discover this strange creature in the hollow of the tree, and they go back to the king of the new land and say, "There's this creature we've never seen. It has the furs of 1,000 animals," and he tells them to go capture the creature uh, and um, and tie it to the carriage, actually, and the and when they go and they wake the creature, and it's Allerlirauh, and she tells them that she has no father. This is what she says: "I have no father. I have no mother," and asks them to be kind to her because she's in this orphan place, and so she goes to the new castle, and there's so much in that too, but that she goes to the new castle and they take her to the kitchen to put her to work in the kitchen, but they give her a space that is a cubby under the stairs. So here's like the way I like to play with it is here's another fourth house space, right? And even like I went back and listened to your conversation with Melanie around the fourth house. And she talked about how she created for herself when she was traveling her little talisman, her fourth house talisman, right? And Allerlirauh has one too. It's her nut, like she has this portable fourth house way of staying in touch with what's deep in her, so that she feels rooted and at home and in her skin, to quote Melanie, wherever she goes. There's something in her who knows that she needs this nut. Something in her knows that she needs to pause in the tree. Something in her knows that she needs that cubby under the stairs where she's going to regroup. And that is where she will eventually, for the first time after leaving, remove the soot, which I never thought of connecting that to grieving before. I love that. That's so beautiful. So there's this beautiful rhythm that I start to see unfolding in the tale where she'll move. Right. She'll move a little more into the fifth house and leave the father's kingdom a little more. But then there's a way to come back and continue the gentle rooting to an authentic soil in the fourth house for her. And there's wisdom in that. It's something innate to her nose to pendulate in that way, which, getting around the somatic approaches to trauma healing, pendulation is so important. There's something about the visual language of astrology and taking a tale like this through it allows you to actually map the rhythmic pendulation from place to place in the healing process, so that it's not just let's move 1 through 12. It's we don't even hear about 1 until she realizes she can't stay there anymore. And now 1 comes online, and then she has to go back and take something from house 2. And then she gently moves into a new kind of fourth house. And then she sneaks into the 6th in the kitchen work, where there's an oven, and there's all these womb images are so deeply woven into this tale. There's just something about that innate intelligence in the psyche to know when it needs to reroute into that.
Yeah, and it's even something that Cameron Allen said when he was on the show. He's talking about the third house, and where the sun is in the third house is between sort of midnight and 2 a.m. So there's actually something about when she leaves with her possessions, she enters that very night world forest kind of a place, right? Like she's going to go reconnect through the night world. And that's what ends up finding a way down to the IC by sort of like fleeing through the neighborhood, going through everything that she knows and essentially leaving what she knows behind, and then coming down into this very rooted place, the IC, entering the 4th, then getting a home in the 4th. And then, we have this sort of new king, and there's a little bit of a spark of like, maybe I will be able to enter the 5th. But as you say, the pendulation, the movement back and forth. And I love this as a way of approaching, your chart or astrology or the astrology of a moment, or anytime you're looking at a chart, allow yourself to be dreamed and moved from place to place. Beware of the linear, beware of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, rolling around like that. Like, allow yourself to move back and forth. And the story allows us to move back and forth as well, because of course we come back to the first all the time with her. We don't really know this girl's name, but she becomes Allerlirauh because she has all these furs on. So she's donned a new persona, hasn't she? She's got this new mantle, and she's gonna be this, and this will work just fine, because she knows she can't be the princess anymore. And isn't it interesting that she says, "I have no father," because of course she does, but we know she has no mother now, but she has no father. She's claiming her place as an orphan. She's claiming that, no, I do not anymore. That in the same way that the handless maiden, our heroine in that, understands that she must go and never come back. And that's the situation, right? She realizes that she's been orphaned from that place. But I think what I love in this story, and I was drawn to that part in the conversation with Melanie as well, the little talismans and the little altar, and then setting, because she was doing so much traveling, she had set up little altars to remind her of home, to bring her home with her, not just a reminder, but to bring her home with her. And that's what she has, the little nut that's got some real treasures in there, some magical nutshell.
Yeah. Well, and I'm so drawn to that, claiming her place as an orphan. There's Marian Woodman give a beautiful talk about that once, where she said that then there's a transformation that happens, and where once you were carrying a wound of abandonment, when you claim your orphan status, you become a child of the archetypal.
Wow. I mean, she's definitely becoming that in this story.
Yeah. And that in that moment, then, rather than experiencing that absence of father and mother as an abandonment, you experience it as permission to live with abandon.
Oh, wow.
That's I think it's so beautiful, man. Marian is, man.
That's very, very well done. And I love that she has 1,000 animals, it's almost like she's entered the chaos in the most beautiful way. Like, in Greek mythology, it begins in chaos, which is just like endless possibilities. And the fact that she has every skin here, it's like, I haven't decided yet who I shall be. So I'm going to be everything for a little while, I'm going to be everything and nothing and nobody. She's kind of essentially, I'm nobody now, but that also means that I'm everybody. I'm every animal, and I'm no person, and that's how I'll be. And that's where she finds solace and finds something. There's something in that, in the 1,000. It's not just one animal. She doesn't decide to be, Raven Woman or something. She doesn't kind of like go off on that quest, like knowing who she is. She goes like, I have no idea now, because my whole identity was wrapped up in something, and that's gone, and there's no way back to it. But my new identity is like endlessly, it's so emptied out with all the soot. It's so in the grief and loss, and it's so in the instinctual that I couldn't really name it for you right now. And therefore I am Allerlirauh. I am I am all of the animals. That's where I am now. That's her identity.
Mm-hmm.
It's very specific to this story, that part, because there's so many echoes of other stories. There's echoes of Cinderella, of course, and others. But how cool in this particular one that's her mantle.
The word that keeps coming forward for me while you're talking about that is creatureliness. That there's something about embodiment there. And I think it's I think there's such a, like, part of the body dreaming work, and it's this, when you, like, I lived so much of my life split into my head, thinking of the Maiden King. There's a split. The tutor inserts a pin in the neck. and splits the main character into their head.
Wow.
And like, I really know what that feels like.
Yeah.
And so to come into a place where you start to inhabit the creatureliness of your own matter again, it can feel so foreign. It can feel, so the Thousandfurs and
Yeah.
these dead instincts that need to become alive again. I love it. So.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the condition? Isn't that the condition of the Western world, and not just the Western world? This is the pin that separates that out, and these floating heads,
Yep.
and the idea that we wouldn't even really need the body. It's such
Yep.
a scary idea. And, I think these stories and the Jungian work and Marian Woodman's work and so much of the work is to connect back to the instincts. And that does involve regression. That does involve re-entering chaotic realms. And there's no way around it. There's no way just to go, we'll skip that part.
You're going to get brought to it eventually.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like I go to this part of the myth with the jar of Dionysian wine that the centaur Pholus has. And Hercules is like, you got to open that. He's like, I'm not going to open that. I've been told not to open that. He's like, you have to open it. And this is the conversation, right? Well, is the centaur going to open, or is the centaur not going to open it? The hero, the greatest hero ever, thinks that he should. And that's our dilemma. Do I open this wine or not open this wine? And of course, when Pholus opens the wine, the wild centaurs attack, right? The feral animals attack, and suddenly it's all sorts of hell breaks loose. And yeah, that's why we don't open the wine. And yet to keep it sealed is its own other dilemma.
Yeah.
And, when that kind of wine is that delicious and has been sealed for that long, yeah.
Maybe there's something of an invitation there to consider identifying with someone like Allerlirauh rather than a solar hero like Hercules. Because if you've tapped into the wine for that long in pursuit of the solar, chaos is a very real threat, I think.
Chaos can break loose and does. Okay, so then let's enter this phase of the story where she's mentored by the cook, and yeah, what's next for our protagonist?
First she's given many tasks in the kitchen that include caring for the hearth, sweeping the ashes. Marian really focuses on the act of sorting the ashes and how important that is as a psychological metaphor. But these day-to-day, very sixth house tasks that she does. And eventually she finds that she gets word that there's going to be a ball. And so the kitchen is in the basement of the castle, which I think is important. Her living space is underneath the stairs. But that is the space where she feels like she can go. She begs the cook to go just look at the ball. And the cook is like a mentor figure. He seems really antagonistic in the tale, but if you look at it through the lens of a mentor who knows how to help someone encounter what's real about themselves, it's kind of a fun way to look at that figure, as though he knew what he was doing to get her to eventually step into her full stature. Anyway, so she retreats to her cubby under the stairs, back into the fourth house. She removes soot of shame or grief, or she removes the soot for the first time since leaving her father's kingdom, and she opens her nut and she places on the golden dress, which astrologically we might say is like considering the inner sun, right?
Yeah. And
then she goes up the stairs to the ballroom, dances with the king, and sort of Cinderella-like, after the half hour is up, she escapes. And then she comes back, and then something really interesting happens where she's like, the cook hands her the responsibility to make the bread soup for the king. And so at this point now, not only has she learned to care for the hearth, which is the space that is capable of holding that alchemical heat. And I love the image of Hestia around the hearth. I love the idea of, I really feel there's something about sensing place in caring for a hearth and for having a hearth that is capable of holding this alchemical heat. And there's and then there's her working with the heat of the oven. I like to imagine the hearth as being part of that, the heat they're using to cook with. Anyways, but she makes this bread soup, and she makes it 3 times throughout the story, and each time she hides one of those little trinkets in the bottom as a kind of message to herself. But significantly, she dons the golden dress first. Then she does a lot of work in the kitchen. And with that second making of bread soup, she hides the ring in. And Marian really explores the idea that this moment of sending the golden ring to her inner king is a moment of covenant. It's a moment of promising herself that she's going to follow through on becoming herself.
Wow.
And I think that's such a beautiful reading of that. So she makes this bread soup, and it's only after she makes the bread soup that and sends the ring up to the king. The king loves the soup. He demands that the cook come and tell him who made the soup. And the cook pretends to be mad at Allerlirauh and says, "What have you done? You've probably dropped a hair in the soup, and you're going to be thrown out on your," like he's keeping the alchemical heat up in the mentoring, know. And she goes up to the ball, or the cook goes up to talk to the king, and the king says, "Who made the bread soup?" And the cook says, "I did." And the king calls him on it. He says, "No way, because this is way better than anything you've made for me before." So he brings Allerlirauh up, and she has put back on her disguise. She's reapplied the soot. So here's this pendulation again. She's put back on the many furs, and now she has this second house object in place so that she can go up and be consciously seen by the king, right? And he asks her about the ring, and she says, "I know nothing of the ring." And he says, "Well, then tell me who you are." And she says, "I am good for nothing." And it's a little bit of a heartbreaking moment for me. But then she goes back down. There's another ball. This time, now that she has made the covenant to herself to follow through on the journey, she's capable of donning the silver dress, which is, I love the way that Anne Baring talks about lunar consciousness. Because she just says it's essentially the participatory consciousness. It's the part of our psyches that's capable of experiencing itself as participating in and being part of life. And I think I just love that. But she wasn't, having carried the wounds of her father's kingdom for so long, she wasn't capable of trying that kind of consciousness on again until she'd done a lot of 6th house work.
Yeah.
And there's so much in that.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I love how, one of the things that really occurred to me whilst exploring the 6th was that it's out of the way or out of the sight of the personality, which I think Brian said originally, and I picked up in the 6th house episode that the personality is the ascendant and the persona and everything, and the 6th house is out of sight of that. It's in the blind spot. And down there, it's what we do, like Allerlirauh is doing. We just do it. We do it kind of almost because we must, and it's not glamorous, and it is a lot of ashes. It is a lot of sort of like separating and sifting and sorting, and but just kind of like being with the cook and with there's nourishment in it, there's something in it, but it's definitely, what it is not is glamorous. It has no glamour in it. It's not going to mesmerize. It's not going to amaze. And yet if it's not done, then we can't go into the next phase, right? Like it's an essential part that I feel, again, the modern world largely forgets. It's like, well, what have you got? How do you sell it? Go sell it, kind of thing. Almost like when we go back to that first house and the Rumpelstiltskin episode, it was that story is about the father says like, yeah, my daughter can do this. She can spin straw into gold, like let's go. She can just make it gold straight away. And it's like, no, that's like it's interesting because that was my first house fairy tale. And this is the sixth house one. It's like, no, it doesn't happen that way. It happens slowly. There's 3 different balls. There's so much time in the ashes, and there's so much time covered in the mantle and cooking and sweeping and doing the chores. I mean, it literally says in this story, she carries wood. She cuts wood and carries water, like this is what happens. And when she is asked that question that really moved you, and I'm moved by it as well. Yeah, she says, I'm nobody. She says, I'm only good for having boots thrown at my head. That's what she feels about herself at that time. That's all I'm good for. Heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But something of the sixth kind of requires that of us. And I love how you're picking up on the mentor, the subtle mentor in this that I wouldn't have picked up if you hadn't brought it forward, of the cook who keeps the heat up and doesn't let her get too carried away with herself and doesn't let her ego take over the show, and does some subtle things, doesn't he? He also goes and takes the odd break so that she can cook the bread soup. He also kind of gets out of the way just at those pivotal moments. So there's a knowing in him. He's cooking her, isn't he? He's the alchemical chef.
Yes, absolutely. And I love the scene where he's told her to sweep. Like, she comes back from the ball and he says, go sweep the hearth. And so she's dutifully sweeping the hearth. And then he gets mad at her for sweeping the hearth because the king wants bread soup, right? Like, it's like, put that down. Stop doing that. Get over here and make the bread soup. Yeah, it's a really interesting figure. And it's interesting to think about that. It's so fun to play with that image as like this part of you that has this wisdom, and it's going to turn up the heat. Like, it's going to make sure that you get to a place where you are invited to come into your own, to participate in life, and it will do whatever it has to do.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then we move to the third ball in that case.
Yes.
So we don't stop. I mean, we haven't spent much time on lunar consciousness, but I love that you were bringing that in. And there's something very lunar about the sixth house in a way, even though technically, I guess, the moon is more associated with the fourth and all of that kind of stuff. But I find like the lunar frequency of the sixth, of the repetitiveness and the sameness of things, and the things just cycling around. That waxing and waning that goes on in the sixth, again, just preparing and preparing and preparing. And, essentially it'd be good here to take a pause and say, well, what are we preparing for? Because we're about to go to the third ball, and we know by the time we get to the third thing, something's about to shift, because 3 is always the magic number. And like you talked about at the start of the episode about androgyny, 3 is also the third option after male, female, masculine, feminine. There's always this magical third thing, magical third way. And so we go into this place here where we're preparing for a particular threshold, astrologically. And that's what the podcast is also preparing us for right now, is to meet the descendant, which is an incredibly threshold, because suddenly we're going to meet the other, the capital O, other. And,
right.
up until this point, it's been our own journey, and suddenly the other is going to enter, and we're going to begin the second half. And it's that important of a journey that Allerlirauh has had to spend a lot of time hanging out in the sixth. You know, the number 3 in fairy tale, as we know, means a lot of times. It doesn't mean 3. It means you've been there until you get it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I love that.
Well, the three is a magic number, and it doesn't mean 3 times. It means until you get it, or until something in you kind of gets that. And now it's time for something to shift, right? That's not even necessarily you that does the shifting, but something in the energetic field does shift on the 3rd time. But 3rd does not mean do it 3 times. It means do it sometimes thousands of times. You know, it means do it until something moves, until something changes. Yeah, it's the number of change.
Then 3 as the number of change. Let me sit with that for a second. I love that, Chris. Wow. You know, jazz musicians have a specific term for the practice room. We call it the woodshed.
Oh, really?
And I don't know where it started or why, but like literally like the place where you go to chop the wood to prepare it for the creative fire.
Wow. The woodshed.
And I feel like the woodshed. So you'll hear musicians say, I'm going to go hit the shed. I'm going to go to the shed. And that means I'm going to go deal with myself by myself alone in a small room and work on my weaknesses, you know? And so I love that there is that number 3 being the number of change, because you can approach something for thousands of repetitions from that many angles.
Yeah.
From Thousandfurs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Until finally you find the thing that makes the change. Or that partners with the change. It's like, it's a dance. It's a very partnering experience. I don't think there's anything about making it happen.
No, because it's not about making it. It never is about making it happen in the stories.
There's something about timing.
Yeah.
That really matters.
And actually it's something outside of the main character that often makes the change happen. Like in Cinderella, the prince then paints resin glue on the step. And in this sense, the king is the one that's going to make the change, right? And so we see often something external makes the change, apparently external, although there's nothing external in the story. But the thing happens that seems like it's outside of the control. And I just want to say also about 3, 6, 9, and 12 are those houses in astrology that are leading into the big transition times, right? So those are also houses that are representative of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're always ruled. I mean, they always have as they're either Hermes houses or they're Zeus houses, you know, either Hermes or Zeus. We're either coming into that kind of like, oh yeah, I've really got something here. It's time to go down the hill. Or Hermes is like, we're going to change something up.
Yeah.
These are those houses.
Wow. Yeah, I'm going to hang out with that a lot. 3 is the number of change.
Perfect. Wow. And so in our 3rd festival.
Yeah. This time she again goes into the cubby under the stairs and again removes the soot and the furs. And she dons the starry dress. And she goes up to the 3rd ball. And this time, the king is ready for her to try and escape because it's the 3rd time. And when she tries to escape, he holds on to her and he places on her finger the ring that she had gifted him through the bread soup. So it's this really important moment of that covenant with her is moved back to her now, and she's wearing it. But she does escape and she does get back down the stairs, but she knows the king is looking for her. And so she very quickly puts on the mantle of furs again to hide herself, but she forgets to remove the dress this time.
Mm.
So she's got the mantle over the dress of stars, and and she's summoned back up to the king, and again she tries to finagle her way out of being seen for who she is, and she tries to leave again. And you'll have to help me with this part of the story, Chris, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
As I remember it, she goes to leave again, and he reaches out to take her hand,
Yeah.
and the fur mantle moves just a little, and the stars are glowing. Like the way I picture it is, it's just this, you can't escape the fact that she's wearing the cosmos. You know? And the king in that moment recognizes her, and she recognizes him, and so the tale goes that.
And then I think Gret takes her hand, and one of the elements there is that she had washed that finger. You know, it's interesting because there's some fragmented images, which is great, but she's washed that finger with the ring on it. So there's just one finger of her natural color, and everything else is covered in soot. And the king reaches out for that. And it's really because at the end of that one, she got very flustered. Maybe it's because the ring got put in her finger, and maybe it's also our cook who's like, now he's really putting up the heat. It's like, you got to get it, you know, like really starts to crank up the anger and the frustration. It's like, get back here now, that kind of thing. And then she's flustered. She doesn't know what she's doing. She doesn't have time. And there's the divine accident, isn't there? The divine accident that she's still wearing the dress of the cosmos. It's such a beautifully astrological image. The way you describe it there of like the fur mantle comes down, the stars are just so staggering. And then he reaches for her hand and pulls it forward and sees the ring and knows that that is her. And that is his bride right there. He's already put the ring there. And she looks at him and is like, yes, this is my place. And they have discovered each other again. And in a sense, there's been a redemption, both of the feminine and the masculine at this time. They have met each other once again. And there's the sense of that divine union, or as Jung referred to it as mysterium conjunctionis, which is so many syllables, I'm bound to get one of them wrong. But, you know, that the marriage of the divine masculine and the divine feminine, right? Like they're coming back into harmonious, or back into some kind of harmony, some kind of relatedness.
Yeah.
Yet again,
there are two images of that alchemical union of the inner opposites that aren't really opposites, right? That Marian Woodman uses that I love. One of them is just the image of the caduceus.
Yeah.
And the idea is like if one of the serpents is the solar consciousness and one of the serpents is the lunar consciousness, that sixth house work is one of differentiating out the two energies and then bringing them back together. And then they go opposite directions. If you imagine the serpents moving up the caduceus, that's the unfolding process of solar and lunar consciousness moving out and coming together. And that's a helpful image to me to kind of ground what this mystery is. And I also love the other image that she uses is she says that it's like a plant where the shoots grow to the sun. So the solar shoots grow up and the lunar roots grow down, but it's the same. They're rooting into the lunar. And especially when you bring that Anne Baring's notion of lunar consciousness into that, like you have to root down into this participatory part of you that's capable of experiencing life embodied, that's how we grow these roots. Could I share a Jung quote with you that's so sixth house made me
love it. Yes.
And this is actually the quote that Marian uses when she introduces this chapter on the silver dress. And it's all about this participatory consciousness and lunar consciousness, and how crucial that is for our wholeness. And this is, so he says, you can only really be conscious of things which you have experienced. So individuation must be understood as life. Only life integrates. Only life and what we do in life brings out the individual. Real consciousness has to be based upon life experienced. Just talking about things is not enough. Isn't that so good?
It's so good. I love it. Another one of Jung's blazing lines, especially the ending. It's a blazing line, you know. Just talking about it is not enough.
Yeah.
It's so great.
And I love I think the reason so before, while I was kind of in the formative part of, and still very much am in my explorations of astrology, I imagine you feel that way forever, I guess.
Yeah.
But it was interesting that my initial inner resonance with the sixth house and with exploring kind of Virgoan energies there, really the image that really resonated with me was of the full moon. Kind of coming from the Marian Woodman thing again, Marian turns around the triple goddess for this psychologically, not mythologically, but psychologically. And she suggests that psychologically, the waxing crescent is the mother and the full moon is the virgin whole in herself. And she has this whole book called The Pregnant Virgin, which is a beautiful exploration of what that means to become a kind of self-supporting, self-sustaining ecosystem in yourself as the virgin, complete in herself, before that word was hollowed out by thousands of years of other kinds of cultural impulses.
Yeah.
It meant wholeness.
Yeah.
Self-contained. Self-contained. So I love that you brought up this sort of lunar side of the sixth house, because that was actually, for me, that was my initial experience of those energies, which felt so ambiguous to me. I would read all these books about the sixth house and go, I have no idea what this is about.
Yeah.
Until I thought, oh, it's the kitchen. This is the kitchen. That's the sixth house. Okay. Like that kind of brought it all together for me. But
well, I love these images that you've given us, and what a beautiful way to round out not just the sixth, but also to round out the first six houses. Because something you've given us here is like I talked about Artemis, and Artemis is the lunar goddess, the virgin lunar goddess. So if there's anyone that is the radiant full moon, it's her. So we get that sense of Artemis being here in this house. You also brought up the caduceus, which is Hermes' magic wand that can put us to sleep and wake us up. And isn't that something that's going on here in the sixth as well? The two snakes of the solar and lunar, but coming together through the central rod, and then those two snakes facing each other. And that's the almost kiss of Eros there. The potentiality for the third exists with wings at the top of that magical wand.
Wow.
And you bring all of these in just right at the end here, as we're like, here's the images that really wrap up not just the sixth, but a whole underworld journey, not underworld, I might even say underground, our night journey that happened as soon as we were born. We didn't head up into the upper worlds, we headed down. And I love that about this medicine wheel, that we headed down. And we went and we explored all of these things, our identity, our possessions, our neighborhood, the hearth and the home and our belonging, and then our sense of individuality and what made us special, and our daimon, and something kind of cool about us and our individuation process. And we came into this house where we're trying to contain all of that, but we're doing it in the absence of the light of the persona, of the personality. And we're doing it round and round. We're in the woodshed of jazz, And we're fine. And if we don't spend our time there, it's just, we must spend our time there. There's no even ultimatum to it. We must spend time there. And that's what makes all the difference. And then as we do that, here we go, the seventh house is available. And that makes it sound linear. And of course it's not. Actually, we go round and round and round. And you know, the glory of the universal rhythms is we get more and more chances to go back to the sixth, to go back to any of these houses. This is a non-linear process. We bounce around, we move from side to side, we pendulate, as you say. And there's medicine in going between. There's medicine in movement. And that, again, is a Hermes thing. And so Hermes, who sort of in some ways brought us in with his golden fleeced ram of the first, is also bringing us out, as is, I think, pretty apt, as he brings us out of the first six houses, he brings us out of the sixth, and he gets ready for that fateful meeting with that capital O other that we find when we hit the descendant.
So beautiful.
Amazing, Ryan. Well, I think that was a pretty thorough and grand exploration, and beautifully well cooked and alchemized sixth house fairy tale episode with the help of Allerlirauh, and we'll say it wrongly and rightly and all the other ways, Allerlirauh. So thank you so much. Thank you firstly for reaching out. Thank you for joining us so soulfully, giving your time to the podcast, and it's been a real honor to have you on here. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Let's do it again sometime.
I would love that.
Thank you for listening to On the Soul's Terms podcast. To support the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review, sharing with friends, or becoming a patron at patreon.com/onthesoulsterms. Until next time.